Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, please. I'd like to welcome you to the Annenberg Dean's Forum, which is being done in connection today with the Black Student Awareness Week and Welcome Week to all of our students, especially African American students. It gives me tremendous pleasure to be able to introduce to you a good friend, a colleague, and a trustee of this university, the University of Southern California. And that is Linda Johnson Rice, who is here with us today, who is going to share some of her perspectives on important issues of journalism, important issues of business, and important issues of public life. And she is extremely well qualified to talk about all three of those topics. We are very proud to say that she is an alumna of this school, of the Annenberg School, with a BA in journalism.
Yay. Yay, yay.
Not satisfied with the BA in journalism, she went on to get an MBA from Northwestern University, from the Kellogg School of Management. And I know there's some of you in the room today who are double majoring or who are looking at combining journalism with business. And you have before you someone who has succeeded in that area by combining those two very important attributes. In addition, Ms. Rice is a member of the Annenberg Board of Counselors, our principal advisors for the Annenberg School. And in her day job, in addition to all the other awards and activities and philanthropic activities that she's engaged in, she is president and chief executive officer of Johnson Publishing Company, which, as you know, publishes both Ebony Magazine and Jet, and has a vigorous online presence as well, to which I refer you. The Chicago Sun-Times named Ms. Rice as among Chicago's 100 most powerful women and the top 10 women in media. She and her family have been very generous with the Annenberg School and have provided the resources to found the Johnson Center on Communication Leadership, for which we are very grateful. She has provided wise counsel both to me and my predecessor, Jeff Cowan. And without further ado, let me introduce you to Linda Johnson Rice.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernie. I understand, and I'm thrilled to be here, but I understand that this is very relaxed and very casual, which works perfectly for me because I'd rather not do a whole lot of speechifying. But what I will do is start off a little bit and tell you a little bit about Johnson Publishing Company. For those of you who don't know, maybe you'll learn something. For those of you who do, maybe you'll still learn something. But the company really was started by both of my parents, John and Eunice Johnson, in Chicago in 1942. And my father came originally from a very small town in Arkansas City, which had about 668 people. And when I last went there to visit, I told him when he was living, if I left him, it'd be 669. Very, very small town, raised by his mother. His father died in a sawmill accident. And what she wanted was a better life for her son. And where he went to school, because it was in a very, very rural place in Arkansas and very, very prejudiced, they only had schooling up until the 8th grade. And because she didn't have the money to move out of Arkansas when he graduated from the 8th grade, he had to repeat the 8th grade. So he stayed there 2 years, and then she got on the train, and the first big stop from Arkansas was Chicago. And that is where they got off. She had relatives there. She enrolled him in school. He went to DuSable High School, and where he excelled and was on the debating team and was head of the school newspaper. And really, my grandmother really instilled in him a great sense of self-pride and a great sense of drive. And he would tell me that as he was practicing for the debating team, he would look in the mirror and talk to himself and debate with himself so that he really could be better than anybody else. And that really was a tremendous drive that he had, and I think that's a drive that you as students really have to have if you're going to succeed. And so he went to DuSable High School, and then he graduated from DuSable and attended the University of Chicago. My mother, in the meantime, came to Chicago to go to school at Loyola University, and she came from Selma, Alabama. He came from very, very rural background. She came from a very upper middle class background. In Selma, she was the daughter of a doctor, and her two brothers were doctors. Her sister was a PhD in English. Now, you're talking long, long time ago, so this is very, very prominent for African Americans. And so they met they happened to meet at a dance in Chicago, and she was there, my mother, Eunice Johnson, was there with someone else. And and obviously she left with someone else. And they came together and they got married. And my father always saw great opportunities for African Americans. And he felt that African Americans really were underserved when it came to the media. And having been on the debating team and having been at the school newspaper, he really felt that this was a niche that he could fill. He started off working in an insurance company, and as a side job in the insurance company, he wanted to start a magazine. So he started a magazine called Negro Digest, which actually was patterned after Reader's Digest. So a lot of what you see really came from emulating another success pattern. So he started Reader's Digest, got a lot of, African American writers who were not actually called African Americans at that time, or black or Negro or anything like that, and got them all together because where else were they going to go to express their views and be able to write? So it sounds much simpler than it sounds. I'm making it sound a lot simpler, but it really wasn't. And got them together and started this magazine. And from there, he said, well, it's fine to have Negro Digest, and he's still working at the insurance company. He said, but I really like Life magazine and what Life magazine does and the photographs that they have and the way they tell their stories about what's happening in the world and what's happening to people in the world and the way they do it very visually. So he loved that, and he said, I want to do another magazine. Now, so he's taken the money that he's gotten from the insurance company, he's taken the money he's gotten from Negro Digest, and he and my mother said, okay, we're going to start another magazine. We're going to start one that looks like Life magazine. My father said, what are we going to call this? And my mother came up with the name Ebony, and she said, it is a wonderful wood from Africa. It's dark, it's beautiful, this is perfect. So, okay, my father was very smart to marry my mother. She's very, very smart. No fool be he. So, so she will tell you that, and my mother now is 92 years old and still hanging in there, but she will tell you that she was the one who was stuffing the envelopes for the subscriptions in the basement of their apartment building, and she did do that. And so that's really sort of how Ebony was born. And my father really had such a tremendous drive, and they worked together as a team to build what I think is an incredible business, but they did it really by sheer tenacity and by never, ever, ever giving up on what they really believed in. And I remember my father telling me stories of, because I asked him, I said, well, how did you even get your first subscriber? He said, well, I got my friends, I got lists of names from my friends, and I would write them letters that said, a friend of mine told me that you would be interested in a magazine that really talks about you and what's going on in your community and reflects your life, and that an intelligent person such as yourself would really want to describe to them. I'm telling you, this is a true entrepreneur here. This is a real salesman. And so from there, the magazine sort of, it caught on. And he got all of his friends to go to different newsstands to buy up copies, and he would go and buy up copies. So there would be some sort of demand created. And then he also realized, well, I can't just do this on my own. There's got to be a major component to the magazine, which happens to be advertising. Because if you don't have advertising really to support the magazine, How are you going to get it printed? How are you going to get it circulated? And so he really became the ultimate salesperson. And the first advertiser he went to, and he started way at the top, was Zenith, which unfortunately doesn't really even exist anymore. So it shows you how the landscape has changed. And he went to, I don't really know how he did this, but he got in to see the chairman of the board of Zenith just by pure tenacity. It was a gentleman named Commander Eugene McDonald. And I'm telling you this because it's an interesting story. Commander McDonald was a big fan of, he was an adventurer and explorer, and was a big fan of going to the North Pole. So who's the admiral that went to the North Pole? Perry? Perry, okay. So Admiral Perry went to the North Pole. What nobody knows is that the person that went to the North Pole with Admiral Perry was a man named Matthew Henson. Matthew Henson was an African American. And my father knew that Commander McDonald at Zenith loved this, loved adventure. So he found Matthew Henson. And he got Matthew Henson to autograph a book that he had written and that Commander Perry had written, and he autographed it to Commander McDonald. And he brought it back to Commander Eugene McDonald and, made this big introduction. Of course, Commander McDonald said, well, anybody that can do this, you've got to have enough tenacity. You must have a really great product here. And so that's how the first ad was placed in the magazine. But it really brings it all back to really having a great sense of drive and being very, very, very creative and very tenacious about what you want to do and not letting go and not let anybody just tell you no for the sake of being able to dismiss you. And really that ad with Zenith is really what sort of catapulted the magazine and really, gave it its legs, because you need that advertising in order to be able to do that. And as a result of that, and my parents working together in such a strong team, they really built a tremendous, what I think is a tremendous success story. And we're still doing that today. We're still doing that today. We're still telling the stories of African Americans with an African American perspective, and I still believe it is extremely important. We, through the history of Ebony, through the 60-plus years of Ebony and the years of Jet magazine, which we started in 1951, we've been able to chronicle the most important things that have happened to black people in the world. And we're still doing that, even though the publishing landscape has changed tremendously. And it has really changed over the past, I would say, 5 to 6 years. With the coming of age of online capabilities, we've had to shift our focus. And while the magazines are still the engines that drive the train, we have built an online component with ebonyjet.com, because we're using those iconic names and those iconic brands to still drive that customer base to our website. But our website is very different from the magazines. It is, the people who write on the magazine don't necessarily write on the website. Some of them do, there's some cross-pollination there. But for the most part, we take a different perspective on the website. It's a little bit younger, which is very good, because our Ebony audience and our Jet audience are a maturing audience. And there's a lot of blogs, so there's a lot of different sort of perspectives there. Is this a visual? Oh, okay. I haven't seen it lately. And so there's a lot of different blogs and a lot of different insight. And we're also selling ad space on that, so we're turning that into a whole nother profit center. And it is growing. It is growing very quickly. It is nowhere near what we have on the publishing side of the business, but a smart business person or smart people who are surrounding a business person, such as myself, are saying you've got to grow this business in other areas rather than just publishing, because publishing is hitting a bit of a plateau, and we all know it's a difficult business. And so coming up is our web business, which has been really been tremendous for us, just absolutely terrific. And also with the magazines, we've also gotten, it's been great for us to watch young writers and editors grow, and not just in the writing, but also, you know, we used to have what was called the art department. Well, nobody has an art department anymore because nobody cuts and pastes to put the magazine together. So now we have a graphic arts department, and now it's just the graphics department. I don't know what it's going to be in another year, but they're all young, great, enthusiastic people, such as the people who are sitting in this room, who've brought us great ideas and great creativity. So they work on the magazine, then we have another group that works on the website, we have another group that's called Creative Services that does a lot of the in-house things, because we have some other businesses that we have within the company. And so we have great opportunities for young people to come and work for us and to really grow and to flourish. And I think that is a wonderful thing that my father really started, because you have to remember, when he started all those years ago, there weren't any places for black people to go and work and to write and to express their creativity and their design and their talents. And so, you know, we love to be able to say that we've launched a lot of really great careers and are going to continue to do so. So that's a bit about the company and giving you, sort of bringing it up to date, and then here I come into the business, and I guess I really started earning a paycheck in 1980, but I really started coming to the company when I was about 6 years old. So after school, you know, everybody went out to play, and I went to the office. I went to the office, and actually it was really great, because when you're in the media business, as you know, you meet the most fantastic people in the world. I mean, just fascinating people from all walks of life. And so I knew that this was really my calling and what I really wanted to do. I actually studied opera for 6 years. I studied voice. Please don't ask me to sing, because it'll be absolutely mortifying at this point. But I decided that really wasn't what I was going to do, and I started really working with my mother, and I worked with my father, and I realized that was a much better gig, and that was much more exciting for me. So, you know, my job now is not only to carry on a legacy, but it really is to expand upon it. And we're doing that with our website. We have what's called the Ebony Jet Entertainment Group. So we've got some films that are in the works we've got, I think, 4 movies that are going to be coming out in the fall of this year. There's some good partnerships that we're working on. And we also have our licensing business. Because we have such brand equity with Ebony and Jet, we have some products that we're going to be doing. We have apparel, there's going to be something in financial services. We have greeting cards that we do called Ebony Inspirations. It's a joint venture with a greeting card company called American Greetings. So those are sold in Walmarts and Targets and all sorts of different mass marketplaces. So there's a lot of growth in the business, because I think when people look at Ebony and Jet and they think, okay, these are just mature brands and mature businesses, and on the publishing side, they've been around for 60 plus years, but it doesn't mean that those are mature businesses. There is still tremendous growth in this company, and very, very exciting growth in it. And I think an opportunities for people such as yourselves, for students such as you, to come in and work for us, and for our company to be able to be a part of the Annenberg School and offer training and guidance and assistance and funding, which is what you need in order to get out of here and get yourself some funding and do what you need to be doing. And so I am absolutely, you know, delighted to be here, to be able to just share a few of my thoughts and ideas with you. So if we want to have questions, or, because I have enough speechifying. I mean, I'm talked out. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh.
I'm going to make just a few comments, and then I'm going to ask Chris Smith, who is the director of the Johnson Center here, to say something about the center and what we've done thus far and what our ambitions are for the future. But and then unfortunately, I'm going to have to dash off in about 15 minutes or so to another meeting that I must attend, but I'll leave you in very good hands with Professor Smith. But I want to underscore something that Linda said, which is the continuing importance of race and ethnicity in American society. There have been tremendous strides that we can see all around us. We have an African American who is a presidential candidate, things that would have been unimaginable some years ago. And yet we still live in a society when the life chances of people of color are very different than the life chances of those who are white in our society. And that's a reality that we continue to grapple with in our national life. If you look at the political debate that's taking place, in all of our leading institutions, it's an issue that we're trying to address here at the Annenberg School, both in our course material that we provide to students, in our faculty and staff, in the intellectual challenges that we take on. But it's also an issue more broadly in the most important industry in the United States of America, which is the journalism and media industry. Without a robust, independent journalism and media industry that is fully representative of all Americans, then democracy suffers. Democracy cannot flourish if all of our voices are not listened to. And it's easy to say that well, we have the internet, we have blogs, we have all sorts of sites. But for those of you who have traveled around to various conferences or meetings, as I have, if you go to a session in Palo Alto or New York, you find that most of the people sitting in the room are not, let's say the audience sitting in the room is not very diverse. This is the new space. This is the new online digital space. The demographics in the room tend not to reflect the demographics in this room, which suggests that the stories are not being told. And there's another level that I think is important for some of our students to appreciate. It's one thing to get online and create a blog, and et cetera, but unless you are also in the room where decisions about the allocation of resources are being made, whether it's on the business side or on think tanks, then the impact that you have is going to be very limited. And so as you think about your own career, think not only of going online and creating content that's so terribly important, but also think about going to the Interactive Media Association. Think of going to the Unity Conference that was just held in Chicago, which brings together Asian American, Hispanic American, and African American journalists from all across the country. So these are very, very powerful venues where not only the content is created, but the ideas are stated that justify and underpin the kinds of activities that Linda Johnson Rice has been talking about today. This is a top priority of this school. It's always been a top priority. It will remain a top priority while I am dean. We are very fortunate, through the generosity of the Johnson family, to have a center here that is going to make sure that this stays on the agenda not only here at the Annenberg School and here at the University of Southern California, but nationally. And what I'd like to do now is ask Professor Smith, Chris Smith, who has agreed to be the director of this center, to say a few words. Some of you already know Professor Chris Smith. He has a BA, I think, from that small town in the Midwest, Chicago, I think.
No, not so small.
LA of the Midwest, really. And a PhD from Wisconsin, I think, and has been teaching with us for 5 years, teaches a very interesting array of courses on communications, including issues of entertainment, and always gets good reviews as an excellent teacher and a scholar. So with that, let me turn it over to Chris Smith, who will continue to lead our discussion.
Well, I feel like I've come full circle because I used to see your father quite frequently when I was an undergrad in Chicago. You all lived in a building right around the corner from one of my dorms, and he was gracious enough to come to our school and impart some words of wisdom and inspired a lot of us.
Oh, so that's where you saw him, because most people, when they say they saw my dad, it was in the grocery store.
Right.
He liked to grocery shop, so most people were usually saw him in grocery stores, okay.
So, I mean, you've been gracious enough to join us today and gracious enough to finance this center. And the center really, just to piggyback on some of the Dean Wilson's earlier comments, is designed to really foster a new generation of leaders to take their position within this very exciting and very challenging time for all media companies and organizations. And what the Johnson Leadership Center is designed to do is to really open up all of the resources of Annenberg and of the university at large to give students the best opportunities imaginable to take advantage of everything we have to offer them. Mentoring opportunities, to develop their skills, opportunities simply to embrace opportunity itself, to come out of their shells and feel at home here. With Linda Johnson Rice's generosity, we know that we'll definitely be able to do that. There's always so much going on here at Annenberg, and we hope that the center will provide a nice funnel to give students a conduit to best take advantage of them, both here on campus, in Los Angeles at large, and increasingly throughout the country and perhaps even abroad. Beyond that, again, to kind of bolster what Dean Wilson suggested, we also envision the center being a hub for thinking through how race and ethnicity is functioning differently in society, within culture, within corporate life, within our political life. And we're very excited about that. I mean, you know, W.B. Du Bois once famously said that the problem of society would be one of the color line. Well, that was true. That's shifting, but that doesn't mean that race and ethnicity have ceased to be important factors in how we interpret and intuit our daily experience. And one need only pay attention to 5 minutes of election coverage, where they're either talking about how white blue-collar workers feel, to how Michelle Obama is received by the population at large, to the significance of her husband Barack Obama's candidacy, to the fact he delivered his acceptance speech on the anniversary of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Race is everywhere and yet curiously nowhere at one and the same time. And so we want to use the Johnson Center to think through some of these issues, think through the ways in which race and ethnicity is changing shape and yet remaining highly significant. And we look forward to doing this over time, building this out over time. And I encourage all of you to be involved, to come to forum like this, and to participate in the dialogue and the discussion, because increasingly will become ever more exciting as more and more of us dig in and really put our shoulder to the wheel of doing work in this area. And we're going to continue. I just had a few questions to pose to. I know that Dean Wilson has to leave, but we're going to just continue with a few general questions.
Sure.
To kind of bolster some of the issues that you've already raised, and then open it up to the room for people who I'm sure have a lot of additional questions. So you had mentioned that Johnson Publishing has had this legacy of bringing the issues and news about African Americans to an African American audience. Mm-hmm. And one could very easily say and describe the landscape of media today as being governed by one watchword, and that's competition. There are more competing factors in the attention economy than ever before. So media companies are not just competing against one another, but they're competing with kids at home playing Guitar Hero. They're competing with video games, et cetera. That also is true beyond technology when it comes to culture. So when your father first started the business in 1942, this was a space pretty much left to African Americans to deal with, this cultural space. Now you can turn on any network on cable TV, open up just about any magazine or newspaper, and find some coverage of the role African Americans play in the broader cultural life, corporate life, et cetera. How do you preserve Johnson Publishing's legacy position as a leader in this space when this thing we now call the urban market has become the watchword of just about any media organization?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I mean, first of all, as far as competition is concerned, I mean, our competition is basically time and attention. it's everybody, nobody has enough time, and your attention is diluted and distracted in so many different ways. So that really is our competition more than anything. But I think what I think you're asking is, what makes us relevant? What makes Ebony relevant? And I think what really makes us relevant is that we speak to the heart of African Americans, and it's an environment of believability. There is you're right, there is a legacy and there's a heritage to Ebony Interjet, but there is also, it is that environment of believability. There's a certain trust, and we're a magazine that's very aspirational and very inspirational. And I think because of that, we also have writers and editors that write and speak from our perspective, and really solely from our perspective, from the African American perspective. And not only do they do this in print, but as they do that as well online. And so I think, our relevancy is our heritage. It is the fact that, we have that Black perspective, and I think it's very, very difficult to duplicate that someplace else.
Mm-hmm. So Black content does not mean Black perspective, partially is what you're saying.
A little bit. I would say that. I don't think that just because, I think it's more difficult for someone who is non-Black to write really about a Black perspective. I mean, I wouldn't suppose to be able to write about a perspective that I didn't really understand and wasn't really a part of, and really a part of that culture. So I would say that's true.
What would you tell students who are seeking to tell stories with that kind of perspective about advancing that perspective, perhaps in other media organizations with more traditional ownership structures, non-African American ownership structures?
You know what, I think what you have to do is you have to be able to articulate your story very well and your concept very well. And in being able to articulate it, and what you're saying is if you go to Time or WashingtonPost.com or the General Market magazine and you want to write on the Black perspective, you have to really be able to articulate why that is important, and only you can do that. Only you as a Black student and you as a Black student can be able to do that. But you have to be able to articulate that to the person that you're trying to sell the story to. It's a little bit of selling in there. You got to be able to do that. And you have to really know what you're talking about and know your homework and believe in it. Absolutely believe in it.
And from your vantage point, how is your organization perceiving the demographic shifts that are occurring in this country with an increasingly multi-ethnic constitution of the population at large, where for a very long time African Americans were the dominant quote-unquote minority group and leveraged the influence that those numbers dictated? That's clearly shifting. How, in the name of preserving your relevance and legacy, are you surfing those tides of change in the population, demographically speaking?
Well, you know what? We really are for African Americans. That is really the premise of our company. That is the driving force behind our company. So as the tides shift, we still are shifting with the African American perspective. So that's really we're not trying to, what we also do though is we're a much more global company. Ernie and I were just talking about a series that we just did in Ebony on Africa, but it was Africa and China, and what is the relationship between Africa and China. So what we're doing now is we're taking a much more global perspective than we have ever taken before. As a matter of fact, we just won an award for our series. One of our senior editors, Sylvester Monroe, who actually came from Harvard to join us, won a fantastic award about that, because more and more we have to take a more global perspective. It's very simple. Whereas we used to be able to, 20 and 30 years ago, write about things that, just happened in it's a rural town somewhere. We do that, but now we have to write all over the world because people are reading Ebony all over the world. And the response that we've gotten from the pieces that we've done, the series that we've done in Africa, have been just tremendous. Now we're doing pieces on the Caribbean and how that ties in. We're doing, we did a huge piece on Sierra Leone because we now have to take a much more global perspective.
Well,
I just want to
Introduce yourself, it's Jonathan Tappan.
Professor Jonathan Tappan. We have publishers come here who tell us very sad stories and depressing stories about
I have
business.
those, but I just didn't want to
But-
start off that way.
No, but I was kind of amazed by A, the fact that you still are a growing business, and B, that your father based Ebony on life, and life is dead, and Ebony is still here. In other words, how have you been able to keep the brands and the things going? And what is it unique about your company that has this kind of better perspective when so many publishers are just ready to shoot themselves when they come in front of us and say, well, we don't know what we're going to do, the internet is killing us, and you seem to be able to navigate it a little bit better.
Well, I think, Wilson, we have tremendously loyal readers and tremendously loyal following, and we are a multi-generational magazine. So that makes a big difference. I mean, we start with the grandparents, we go to the parents, hopefully we're with the kids who are in here, and if the kids aren't with the magazine, they'll be with the website. So I think we're much more multi-generational in that respect. And yes, I'm not giving you a happiness story, believe me. This is not a fun time in publishing. This is a very, very challenging time, a very, very difficult time. And we've made some changes in our circulation because it had plateaued, and then I won't give you all the grit and grime of the Audit Bureau of Circulations and all the sort of collars that they put on publishers now. But it's a very challenging time. But at the same time, we really haven't strayed from what our core philosophy is for the magazine, and it is aspirational. It is about inspiring African Americans that they have a great life and that there is a better life for them. And so we've never really veered from that. It's just that we've taken that now, as I said, on a more global perspective, but we've never really left our core premise.
Let me just toss out the table. My understanding, and Geneva, you can let me know if this is accurate, that the single strongest stream of journalism that really is growing is the ethnic media. If I'm not mistaken, Hispanic and Chinese and Korean, and that's doing pretty well, as I understand.
And I think that it's so interesting to hear you use this word again and again, and I think it's representative of much of this, as you say, are unique in that it's growing in the stream of media, and that is aspirational. There's a closeness to audience, or to community in much of this media that I think other media lack.
Well, and it's probably growing, along with the fact that population is growing in that trend, and the Hispanic population is growing. There's been a much greater influx in the United States of Asian Americans and Asians. So, I mean, that shift is sort of changing, and those publications in the media is reflecting that, and the culture is reflecting that.
Well, one of our colleagues here, Sandra Baldwin-Keesh, has a very robust research project looking at the consumption of ethnic media and information resources by ethnic communities here in Los Angeles. And one of the facts that, or one of the factors that she's come up with that still speaks curiously to the issue that Jonathan raised about brand loyalty is that traditionally, ethnic immigrants turned away from their ethnically targeted newspapers and publications as they mainstreamed. That has not been the case, it seems to be, with African Americans. And one of the things that Sandra's asking is, will it similarly be the case for the new generation of ethnic immigrants we're seeing today? Are they remain, particularly Hispanic audiences, are they loyal to their information sources in a way that Western and, and Eastern European immigrants weren't in the beginning of the 20th century? And any thoughts on that about maintaining?
Yeah, I don't know the perspective on other outside of the African American perspective, and I'm not saying that I know that in full, but I know that African Americans, we think of ourselves as our own home and our own nurturers, and you know, it's tough out in the rest of the market, and I can tell you how many times we've had editors and writers who have left our company to go work for a general market magazine or a general market publication or a general market website and have come right back knocking on the door because it wasn't the nurturing environment, it wasn't what they felt was satisfying and fulfilling for them. So, you know, it's corny, but there is no place like home. And that's what we consider Ebony.
Still are willing to make a magazine for 65-year-old people is important. Because People Magazine and Us Magazine is making a magazine for 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds. You know, they don't care about anybody.
Yeah, the average age on Ebony is just under 40. It's a little shy of.
But at least you're still holding on to the older generation, which.
But we're trying. But believe me, we're holding on to the older generation, but we are doing our best to try to pick up younger people, and that's what we're trying to do with our website. And let me tell you, this has been a real challenge to try within the publication to bring in younger people into Ebony and yet not alienate the fundamental base you have in the core base of the magazine, because, you know, people who are 20 don't really read a lot of the stuff that people who are 45 and 50 read, and so that's been a real challenge. We've made some real mistakes. I mean, some real lulus on some of our covers where I thought, okay, we'll do, and this has nothing to do. He's a great kid, Chris Brown. We did him with his shirt off. He's a singer, tattoos, great photo, dead in the water. Dead in the water for us. And he's fabulous. He's wonderful, and he's a good kid, clean cut, all that kind of stuff, but it didn't quite resonate the way we wanted it to resonate with our audience. Yet, we just came off of our August issues of Ebony, and we did something we've never done before. We did 8 different covers on the 25 coolest brothers. And well, I'm so glad, because you weren't the only one that loved it, because that really, and we didn't print any more magazines now. We just divided up the print order across 8 different covers. And I mean, this is a really fun part of being in media, because if you had sat through our editorial meetings trying to pick those 25 coolest brothers, we had more fun and more fights, but that really sold unbelievably well for us. We have our September cover, who is Michelle Obama, who I think is going to do extremely well. First, the timing of it is perfect. I mean, all systems sort of have to be go on that. But you know, we've made some mistakes, and you know, I'll give you another example. This was so long ago that the people who are I'm looking at this side of the room. This looks like the younger side of the room over here. People who are on this side of the room won't even know who Carol O'Connor / Archie Bunker is. But there was a show. Oh, you do? All in the Family. Okay. So, okay. Norman Lear. Oh, Norman Lear. We know Norman Lear. We love Norman Lear. So anyway, the only white person to be on the cover of Ebony was Carol O'Connor. My father did. This was before me. Said, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to do a leap of faith, the article was written because his character, Archie Bunker, was such an unbelievable racist. And the person, Carol O'Connor, was nothing like that. He was nothing like that. He had an African American son he had adopted and nurtured, and it was just a whole nother person. So we took a leap of faith, and that just, this will speak to the affinity of African Americans. The letters that we got saying, wait a minute, this is Ebony Magazine. This is our magazine. We don't care how nice Carol O'Connor is. This is not going to work for us. This is not going to work for us. So it is really hard. I mean, and we try. We know our audience, I think, very well. But on occasion, you think you get creative and you try to step out of your box a little bit, and you get your hand smacked.
There was a question over here.
It's really just an observation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michelle Turner, Director of the Office of Black Alumni Programs Below. But I just wanted to share an observation that, for those who don't know, how families really have grown up with Ebony. And in my family, for instance, there are 2 magazines that I grew up with. One was the cover that had Dorothy Dandridge on there because my grandfather and my father loved that woman, and it sits in my house today. The second one was published in 1963, and it was an emancipation issue where all of the leaders basically in the fight for civil rights had essays in that magazine, and I still have it. John Kennedy was in there. Oh my God, there were articles about Medgar Evers and all of this, and so being able to grow up and just be able to chronicle history in that way has been just important in our own household. So
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And we still do that. I mean, we've asked, Barack to write a piece for us, and we've had many leaders write pieces for us. And, we've asked John McCain to do something for us. We've gotten a no, but that's okay. That's okay. We go on record as making the ask. But yeah, you're right. We try to chronicle as much as we possibly can, and as I said, we have different people who write for us on the website. But I would still say that while the print publications and that landscape has changed dramatically, I, for one, don't believe print in magazine form is going away. Newspapers are having a bit more of a difficult time. I think niche magazines like ours, and we are still a niche magazine, I think we will survive. And you need young people like you who can go out and get stories. It's one thing to sit, in your garage or at your desk and blog. That's one thing. But somebody's got to be out there on the street, talking to people, reporting firsthand about what is happening in a community, what's happening in a political convention. And so you've got to have those people, you've got to have those feet on the street.
I had a couple of organizational questions before I turn it back over to the audience. How would you speak to the issue of being a privately held company? What kind of opportunities and enabling factors are at work in being privately held, and what constraining factors are at work when you're trying to innovate and compete in these new technologies?
Well, the constraining factors are funding. I mean, you're really working within your own pool of money. You're not, when you're a publicly held company, you have shareholders, and so you're really working with their money, which is a lot more, but you're also responding to what they want. It doesn't, when you're a publicly held company, you don't tend to be as nimble as you can be when you're privately held. When you're privately held, you can make decisions immediately. The Hurricane Gustav that was coming into New Orleans, we made a call, and my editor called me in the middle of the night and said, I'm putting a reporter on the plane now. Now, the hurricane, thank God, it turned, but we had somebody there. We were able to make that call instantly and get somebody out there. So while you have the constraints of not always having the capital to be able to do what you want, I think if you're smart and you can run a strong business, you can get outside funding without giving up control of your company. That can be done. And it allows you the flexibility to be able to move quickly on either stories or on concepts. On concepts. There's not a lot of bureaucracy in our company at all. I mean, things come to me instantaneously, all day long. All day long, instantaneously. So that I think is a difference. The constraint is that you don't have the funding. The advantages is you have the ability, the flexibility to basically do what you want to do.
And Johnson Publishing is unique among medium companies in that your revenue mix is generated by a lot of non-traditional sources, for a publishing company. You own fashion, you have a fashion business.
Yeah, we have a cosmetics business.
Could you speak to how those synergies enable you to be nimble, or how do they work together?
Well, because when one isn't making money, the other one is. So you have a little funding pool there that you can work from. But you got to understand, all these other businesses all came from Ebony Magazine. The cosmetics business, we own a company called Fashion Fair Cosmetics. That was started from the subscriber list of Ebony. It came from culling the list of African American women, sending them notices that we had started this cosmetic company, driving them into the stores where they live from that list. So the list that we have, I mean, I sort of call it our Fort Knox because it is so incredibly valuable. You can start a whole business, off of just that. So there were definitely synergies there, but the engine that drives the train is really the magazines.
And finally, people talk all the time about how when it comes to innovating, organizations have to change their structure in some way, shape, or form. They have to divide operations between different entities, start new startups within internal. How has that played out at Johnson?
You know what? So far, so good. But let me tell you a couple things. When my father passed in 2005, I have to tell you, it was very traumatic, but it was traumatic for me, but it was traumatic for the company too, because he'd been the leader for so long. He started this business, this was his whole life, and so many people who work there started 40 years ago. And these are people that knew me when I was, 5 years old and 6 years old, and now they're still there and I'm their boss. And at the same time, I realized that I had to bring in new people in order to execute the strategies that I wanted for growth for the company. So, to navigate those waters and have heritage people in the company and an influx of new people and have them try to work together, I will tell you there is no blueprint for that. I don't care what consultant out there tells you that. There is no blueprint for that because people are human beings. And some people embrace change and other people don't. And for many reasons, some people feel very intimidated by change and they're very uncomfortable. And, am I going to lose my job? That's the first thing people think of. Am I going to lose my job? How am I going to fit in here? And I have to tell you, I did not do this alone. I mean, there were other people in the company that helped me tremendously, but this was really, really a tough thing. And there were some people that really got on board right away, and then there were some people that we suggested that they might want to seek another career path outside of Johnson Publishing Company. That was a very nice way of putting that, wasn't it? And we helped them to do that. And so now we're really in a groove where people are working together. But it was, let me tell you, there was some loggerheads there that I really didn't know how I was going to get through some of that stuff. But it was a lot of hand-holding and a lot of, this is when the real word leadership really comes into play, because there was a lot of leadership that I had to do and a lot of team leading I had to do, but we got it done, and I think we're a better company for that and a better magazine for that and a stronger magazine. I think for a while we were a little bit complacent. I mean, we're Ebony Magazine and we're pretty sure of who we are, and we didn't have a whole lot of competition and not a whole lot of new ideas either. And now we do. We have competition, but we have great ideas and we have great people who can really, I think, step up to the plate and a lot of influx of a lot of younger people. But I have to tell you, I could sit here forever and tell you these stories that it was some of it wasn't too pretty.
Have you dealt with any sexism in the industry?
You know what? I have been very fortunate. I really haven't. And I think I probably, within our own company, I probably could have within our own company, except for the fact that my father was a tremendous guide there. And he recognized the talent of women so long ago. He had men writing about cooking and women writing about sports, because he thinks, and I still agree with him, that you've got to be more of a generalist. It's great for you to specialize online, but you better understand what it means to be out there to be a beat reporter. And you better be able to take a picture too while you're doing it. So, because it's more and more, you're going to have to be able to have that kind of flexibility. So he was great as far as really laying down, you know, the guidelines that he never had that sexist attitude. Our general counsel is a woman. Our CFO is a woman. Our chief human resources person, a woman. We had our top senior editor, woman. I mean, we didn't have that at our company. No, we didn't have that.
Yes, I just want to say what a blessing it is for you to come and speak with us today, because I realized as you were speaking that your father was my commencement speaker in 1989 when I graduated from Annenberg. And it's
Hey,
such
I
a
was there.
pleasure.
I was in the audience. And he did a very good job. Very good job.
Very inspiring. And
Yeah.
now you have come full circle
Yeah.
to inspire me again.
Oh,
So
thank
this
you.
is-
Thank you.
thank
Yeah,
you for
that
coming.
was a lovely commencement. It was good.
Yes, you had a question, sir?
I had a question about where you're finding writers. Maybe it's different for your kids. But are you looking to? I mean, for online and for your
You know,
magazines, are you
Yeah,
picking?
we're
cherry-picking
always looking.
poachers,
We're,
or-
we're always looking. Even though the economic times are tight and so there's limited resources to add new people, we have internship programs. So we have offices in LA, Chicago, New York, DC. And a lot of the interns that have worked with us are now working full-time for us. As a matter of fact, one just came back from covering the convention. We have internships in all different areas now. So it's not just print. We've got them online. We've got an intern who we just hired who's doing editing for us, because we now have our own editing booth for our entertainment pieces. So we've got, you know, internships in those programs too. We also have them in corporate communications, PR, public relations, all of those things too. So we're constantly looking for people, constantly.
It's going to make a lot of happy families.
Yeah, but you know what, because you know what, I am such a strong believer in that, because where else are you gonna get a chance to really sort of, you know, get your feet wet and really, you know, understand what it is to really work.
Well, we have time for one last question.
That's all?
Yes.
You were talking earlier about the difference with an African American audience, and especially having more women in magazines. What's your opinion about Essence Magazine in terms of the competition and maybe taking away more African American women readers? Do you feel that a pull there, or do you feel that there's some type of working together where you're able to cross those same readers over to Ebony and not lose?
You know, it's interesting. Essence is, first of all, I think it's a terrific magazine. I subscribe to it. I have from day one. I think Essence is now 35 years old, and the people who started it are actually friends of ours, and we were silent investors and owned 20% of Essence up until the day it was sold. So we clearly believed in it. We knew they had a great product. There is a huge overlap between their African American female audience and ours. As a matter of fact, we have more female African American readers than they do, but we're a bigger magazine. So I think the landscape is ripe for all of us. There's no question about that. Do we compete? Yes, we do, and they will tell you that, and we will tell you that. We compete with them head on for advertising dollars. We compete with them month to month for covers. We go back and forth all the time. As a matter of fact, there's one person we were working on, and we got mad, and we went after somebody else. But that's the nature of the beast. But is there room for both? There's room for more. There is room for more.
I'll make one quick
Yes,
comment.
please, Judy.
I wanted to mention that Linda has been so generous in her outreach toward students, and one thing that you did during Unity was host a reception. Francine son Wilson, the other Dr. Wilson, Ernie's wife. is
Hi,
here.
Francine.
Ernie and Francine included me generously in the trip over to what is a smashing office that Johnson Publishing has, with drop-dead views of Lake Michigan.
It's the house that John Johnson built.
And it really is amazing. And you hosted Howard and,
Right.
of course, the Johnson Post, and it was a remarkable experience. I think your outreach is such a way of putting into action what you're saying about you really believe in this and aware of it.
Absolutely. We had, I thought we were going to have 200 people. We had 380 people. And then I realized, though, that these were 380 starving journalists. Because we had food and drink, and that's what they did. That's what they did. But it was great. It was great. It was wonderful. It was wonderful to see so many people who are in a field that I love. That I absolutely love. And I know writing is tough. I am not a good writer. I have a degree in journalism from the Annenberg School, and I'm very proud of that, but that's not my strength. My strength is more in leadership and much more in strategy, and I think people who can write and write effortlessly and eloquently are just brilliant, and I'm assuming that's all y'all in this room.
Well, I've just been informed, we do have time for one last question, and the gentleman over here has been very patient.
Since majority of your readers are females, African American females, how do you plan to reach the African American males who don't want to read Double XL or King magazine? How are you trying to penetrate?
Well, you know, I would say the majority, let's not say the majority, let's say that, say 55% are female. So we've got a huge male audience that we deliver and that we cater to. We used to have a magazine just for men called Ebony Man. We've had several magazines. We've had some failures. And I loved the magazine. It was skewed towards men, the whole thing, but doggone it, y'all men didn't buy. You didn't buy the magazines.
Was it because maybe Abby is written from the African American female perspective?
No, these were all men that worked on the magazine. No. Gotcha. These were all men. There's the editor, it was all men. And we just, maybe we didn't have the right mix at the time, but we just couldn't make it work. And it existed for about 7 years, and then after that, we just had to pull the plug on it. And you got to know when you got to do that, so you make those hard choices. But come back into Ebony and take a look on our website. And,
Well, Linda, thank you so much for spending some time.
oh, this was so fun.
If you have time, I know that there'll be a few students who might have some further questions. And thank you all
Absolutely.
so much for
Absolutely.
coming.
Thank you very much.